Hello, I'm Dr. Tiffany Doan, and I am a professor of biology at New College of Florida, which is the honors college of the state of Florida in Sarasota. And I am a biology professor, which means I teach biology classes. I teach a wide variety of classes, introductory classes, advanced classes, and also I conduct research. Some of the classes I teach are things like Foundations of Biology Laboratory and lecture. I teach animal behavior. I teach evolutionary biology, herpetology, and lots of other courses. I could list a lot of them. The type of research that I do is on evolutionary biology and ecology of reptiles. I work particularly in South America, and I work on lizards that live in the Andes and the rainforests of South America. I also do some research on the lizards that live in North America and Central America and the malaria that they have. So there's very little research done on lizard malaria, even though malaria probably originated in lizards, not in people. And so there's some interesting research that I'm doing there as well. I got a bachelor's degree from the University of Miami, and then I took some time off, did some research, and eventually got my PhD at the University of Texas in Arlington in quantitative biology. So a typical day looks like for me, it's actually quite variable because I'm a professor. Sometimes I teach, sometimes I'm doing research, sometimes I'm doing other things. So it's quite a lot of different things. But when I'm teaching, I'm on campus and teaching either my laboratories or my lectures or sometimes field classes such as Florida Natural History. In addition to that, of course, with that goes grading papers, writing lesson plans, and things like that. For research, because most of my research is in South America, I can't do it all the time, but I do take quite a lot of trips there. But I do work with data, doing statistical analysis, writing, things like that. And then for the local research, which I do with a lot of undergraduate students, we can go out and catch lizards, take a small sample of their blood, release them, and then test whether they have malaria or not, and then work with those data. If I try to think about what made me go into this field is that I just love animals, really. I always have. I played with lizards as a child in Jacksonville, Florida. Reptiles are also a really great group to study because not that many people study them. You think of biologists that study mammals and birds and things like that, but reptiles are a relatively understudied group. So I really like working with them. And I kind of always knew that. Maybe I didn't know that exactly when I was an undergraduate, but it was one of the things I was considering. And then when I started thinking about what would I like to do for my research project when I did a master's or a PhD, one of the things I considered was doing marine biology. But at the end of the day, I said, no, that's too confining. I would rather be able to study all animals as opposed to just the ones that live in the ocean. I do still love those, and I do a lot of scuba diving, things like that. But I work on terrestrial animals living on the land, especially ones that live in the mountains in South America. So I always kind of did know that's what I wanted to do. Although I don't remember this, my mom tells me that when I was not actually sure how old, 5 or 6 years old, and I had a little fashion show in some summer program I was doing, and they asked all of the little girls in the group, what do you want to be when you grow up? And a lot of them had, when you're 5 years old, I guess you say things like, you want to be a model or a nurse or maybe a doctor. I said zoologist, which apparently made everyone laugh. I don't remember this, but this is a story from my mom. So I guess I knew, yes, since I was a very young child. When I was in college, I took lots of biology classes. One of the ones prior to that was AP biology that I took in high school. That really was amazing. I loved it. And I ended up getting the highest score you can get, a 5 on the AP bio exams. That really sort of told me that not only did I like biology, but I was also quite good at it. In college, I really took a wide variety of classes, which I highly recommend. Some people know exactly what they want to do and then take only those kinds of classes, but you really don't know exactly what you want to do, even if you have an idea. So for example, I love genetics. I think genetics is really cool. And I worked as a student, worked in a molecular genetics, a classical genetics lab. And even though I thought it was intellectually interesting, I found that it was, I don't know, the work of it was kind of boring. So that was good experience because I was able to cross that off my list. Although I like classical genetics, it's not really what I wanted to do. And so I had to sort of keep taking different types of classes to cross them off and then to pick other ones that I liked. In college, I guess I didn't have a lot of extracurricular activities. I played on a softball team. But I wasn't in very many clubs. I was in the Tri Beta Biological Honor Society, but I was kind of a shy student, so I didn't enter a lot of clubs. Although I did do other non-school activities like working with a film crew, helping them, being a behind-the-scenes person, doing a lot of filming, which is a random thing that I did, but also very fun. Maintaining focus to study, that for me wasn't that hard because I guess I've always been kind of an academic at heart. And so I always studied. I always wanted to do well. Probably in college, there was more of a B student. I just sort of did enough. And it took me into graduate school before I realized, no, if I'm going to get a PhD, a B is not good enough. I really need to just get A's. Even though at that point, I guess it doesn't matter. But just for me, for anyone going for a PhD, you should just strive to get A's because getting anything less is kind of silly if you're going to be an expert in the field. Research projects I'm working on, I kind of mentioned, but I have been able to do a few other things that were quite interesting. So one of the research projects I've been working on in Peru was one where I took 11 students with me in January of last year to Peru. New College of Florida has a 1 month independent study period. And so I was able to take 11 students with me to work on real research projects in Peru. And one of the ones that we worked on turned out to be amazing. And it was amazing because the results we got were the exact opposite of what I thought we were going to get, which is actually a really good thing. So these lizards that I work on live in the high Andes Mountains. So it's very cold where they live all year round. And they're lizards, so you think they're ectothermic, they're cold-blooded, so it's not that great for them because they don't have a lot of heat, which means they're pretty slow. But that is great for researchers because they're easy to catch. So you lift up the rock where they're living, and they are like, oh no, I need to run, but they're too slow, and you catch them. So they're really fun to work with, they're easy to work with. But what I had noticed, unfortunately, is if I grabbed them and it was kind of a warm day, they then sometimes would just die in my hand. Like within 5 minutes, they would just drop dead. And I assumed it was the heat of my hand, and it was horrible. That didn't happen very much because there weren't very many warm days, but that did happen. I said, oh no, they're really sensitive to temperature. So what's going to happen with global warming? So I was very worried about that. But I had no data because no one has ever worked on these lizards, really, except me. And so I said, I'm going to test this for real. So I took a gang of students, excellent students who went and worked very hard on this project, and we caught 2 species of lizards, and we did thermal acclamation tests where we tested their CT max, which is their critical thermal maximum. And it's this long procedure, but basically it was kind of a funny procedure where you have a tub of water, and then inside the tub, you put smaller plastic containers like Tupperwares, basically, float them on the water so that when the lizard is in the tub, it's basically becomes the temperature of the water underneath. It's not actually touching the water because it's sitting in the little Tupperware. And then what we can do is slowly over time increase the temperature of the main water, which increases the temperature of the lizard. We can do it slowly so that they don't have any shocks. It doesn't happen too quickly. And so we increase their temperature over time, and then we see at what temperature they're unable to function, basically, which is not die. They don't die, but they do stop their function, and they may have a bit of a spasm, which sounds really awful and is not very pleasant to watch. But after that happens, we immediately take them out, record the temperature, And then we slowly cool them down, and we've never had any lizard have negative effects from that. So we watch them before we release them back to where they came from. But anyway, the reason it was interesting is we did this, and the temperature kept going up and kept going up and kept going up. And we were just like, I was shocked because I've studied this for years, and it just kept going up. And my students, I had to step away to work with other students, and the students that were still there were afraid that I was not going to believe them. So they started taking pictures of the thermometer because it kept going up and up and up. And it turned out that the lizards on average could get to about 39 degrees Celsius, which is, well over, what is that? Almost like about 98 degrees Fahrenheit. And it turns out they can handle incredibly high temperatures they would never, ever get to in their habitats, no matter how much global warming ever happens. So they could go up by 30 degrees Celsius over their normal temperatures. And so it was shocking, and I was completely wrong in my hypothesis, which was amazing because that meant that the lizards are going to be okay with global warming, unlike all the other lizards that have been tested everywhere else, which are not going to be able to handle this. So what we have is some really unusual lizards that are able to handle high temperatures, and very low temperatures as well. So very interesting group. Let's see. I guess one thing that I wanted to say about careers is my career has been long and winding and frustrating at times. So as I said, I knew I wanted to be a biologist. I knew I wanted to be an academic. And so but it's very hard to find a job in academia, which you may have heard, because there are a very limited number of jobs, and people, have tenure, so they don't leave. And so you really need a retirement or a death to get a new position. So it's quite hard to find one. So I accepted a position that I didn't really want because it was the only one I was offered when I was applying. A lot of amazing people. I had a lot of great students there. The students were great. Our department was great. The university, on the other hand, I didn't get along with very well. And so I wasn't very happy there. It was a very high teaching load. I had to teach sometimes 6 classes per semester, between 4 and 6 every semester, which is so much that I don't have time to do any research, really. And so after 7 years there, I decided I'm going to leave. And when you have tenure, which I did at the time, you're not supposed to leave your job. Unless you're going up to a better job. And I looked and looked and looked and couldn't find a job that I wanted. And so I just left, which in some ways is kind of the kiss of death for an academic career. But I did that knowing that, yes, it may not be great for my career, but it was better for my mental health. It was better for me personally. So I left. I moved away. I lived for about a year without really working. I was just working part-time doing various things. I was a data consultant, and I was teaching martial arts, which I do. And so a lot of my colleagues were shocked by my decision, and also they begged me to try to go back and get my job back. But I didn't do that. And I did bounce around for a while. It is very hard to get a job after you leave a job like that. And so the kind of types of jobs that I've had since then are not tenure track jobs. They are instructor positions, which in some ways is considered lower position. It doesn't usually involve very much research, but mostly teaching. But I'm going to do research anyway because I love doing research, and so I always have. And in fact, even though I'm an instructor now, I'm still teaching less than I did when I had the tenure job in Connecticut. And I get to do a lot of research, even if it's not technically part of my job. And I'm very happy at the institution I am. New College of Florida is a great place to work. So I guess the moral of my story is your career path doesn't have to be you go from one thing to the next, and it's always perfect. My career is not remotely perfect, but I'm a very happy person, and I really love the job that I have, and I get to do what I love, which is teaching and research, and I get to kind of do it on my terms in the position I want to be in. So sometimes it's a struggle, but keep going and you will eventually get to the kind of job you really like. So thank you.